Hey everyone, welcome to the Mental Playbook with Christine Dalgity. We're here to chat about all things mental health, share some awesome stories, educate, and advocate to break stigmas and gain power through knowledge for all ages and walks of life, and give you the tools you need to boost your mental game. So grab a coffee, get comfy, tune in, get inspired, and let's dive into some fascinating conversations. Remember, your mind is super powerful, and with the right tools and knowledge, you can master your mental playbook. And while you're doing that, take care of you. Hey everyone, Christine here. Welcome back to the Mental Playbook with Christine Dalgity. Today's episode is close to my heart. Parenting and mental wellness. Supporting your child's mental health while not losing your own. If you've ever found yourself crying in the bathroom after your child's meltdown, shower was always my favorite place, nobody could hear me, or lying in bed awake at night, wondering if you're doing enough, if you've done anything to harm your child, if you're parenting the way you think you should, those sleepless nights, then this episode is for you. Breathe. You're not alone. You're not failing. You're growing, and so is your child. We often talk about how siblings, when you grow up with siblings and you're adults talking about your childhood, I often hear how so many people have different memories of their childhood or memories of the parenting that they had. And sometimes it can get into heated debates, like that's not true, that's not what they were like. The truth is, every child in a family has a different parent, even though they're the same two parents or same parent. Because what you're like with your first child is not what you're like with your last child. Because you grow, you learn, you age, you mature, and you parent differently with each child. So there is truth in the fact that, what the first child might have experienced is not what the last child might experience, or the second child. And that is pretty much what we're going to talk about today. Our mental health while we're parenting and trying to support our children with their mental health. Parenting is one of the most challenging jobs you will ever take on. It's probably the most demanding role you'll ever have. It's a 24/7 job that carries responsibility, emotions, judgment, and everything you do creates a life for this human. And everything they feel, you feel times 1,000,000. It asks us to be patient, present, and regulated. Often when we're expected to do this, we're feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, and that's just with the parenting part. That's not all the other stuff that we're going through in life. We can get very triggered. When I say, all the other stuff we're going through in life, it's also our childhood that we see. Right now, when I hear, somebody's going through something with their child, or there's something, when I hear something about a child, I kind of look at how old. I used to think about, when Ryan was this age. Now I look at, I'll say, that's McKinley's age, or that's Edie's age, and it puts things into perspective, right? So we start to, or wow, when I was McKinley's age, this is what I was doing. Right there, we're bringing our childhood, or as a grandparent, your child's or grandchild's, your child's childhood into this, right? So there's all of that, plus managing the day-to-day and your child's mental health. We call that a dual challenge. It's supporting your child's emotional needs while managing your own emotional needs and your own mental health. And here's the truth. Your child's emotions, your child's reactions will often mirror your emotional needs. Children look to us to help them regulate. They look to us to help them react in situations. And it's not because you're doing something wrong. It's because children need us to co-regulate. They need help co-regulating. So if a child sees you overwhelmed, you may see more emotions of theirs. You may see more behaviors of theirs. If it's a highly charged situation or a tense household, you're feeling the tension, you may see your child acting out, talking back, having a stomach ache, whatever it happens to be. So let me share a client story. I'll just call my client Betty. Betty had a 6-year-old child. She came to me feeling defeated. Her child was having daily temper tantrums. And she was dealing with these constantly, and she felt like she was constantly walking on eggshells, trying not to trigger her child, trying not to say the wrong thing, triggering, making sure the child was happy, which is a whole other thing, right? Because then that child's not regulating. We're trying to make sure the child does not dysregulate instead of teaching how to regulate. But it's coping. That's how Betty was coping. Through our work, Betty realized that her own anxiety was being triggered by her child's. So her trying to make sure everything's okay and everything was because her child's tantrums triggered her own anxiety as a parent. And so it just became this cycle. Seeing her child in distress, no parent wants to see their child in distress. And that would trigger her anxiety. So she was becoming hypervigilant and this walking on eggshells sort of thing, instead of letting her child have a temper tantrum. So she wasn't just reacting to her own child, she was reacting to her inner child at the same time. So we worked on that and we provided strategies. And sometimes it was, if your child's going to have a temper tantrum, walk away. When they start to calm, come back in. Ask yourself, what's the worst thing that can happen if they're tantruming on the floor? Obviously, if you're in the middle of a store or something like that, it's a little bit different. But if they're at home, what's the worst thing that can happen? And she was like, really nothing. At first, she was, well, they're so emotional and they're getting upset. And if I don't help them, they're going to think that I'm not supporting them. And no, you're going to give them the skills and they're going to learn how to regulate on their own. Her experience was she felt unsupported. So there's the mirror, right? Often too, I've talked about this in other videos, we project our own childhood issues, our own childhood traumas onto our children unknowingly. And again, there's this dual challenge. So if your child, and I've used this example before, but if your child comes home from school and you say to them, how was your day? Fine. How was recess? Oh, nobody played with me. And right away, your response goes right back to when you were a child and people wouldn't play with you. And your response is, that must have been horrible. That's not very nice. Why wouldn't people play with you? Your child may look at you like, huh? Right? Because they're saying, well, I just went and walked with the teacher. Or I just found other people to play with. You projected bad experiences, uncomfortable experiences that you had onto your child, and that then could create anxiety in your child that wasn't there already. We do that. Again, I am not judging anybody for parenting. This is a non-judgment zone. I'm just pointing out things that we do unknowingly. And it doesn't mean you're going to damage your child. It just means that these are learning points that we can try to turn that around. So instead, in talking of these dual challenges, regroup, remind yourself that was your experience, and say to your child, oh, nobody played with you. What do you think about that? You'll get their answer, and then you can go from there. Maybe they say, it was really horrible and I didn't like it. Then you can talk about it. You can talk about your experience. I understand. I felt like that when I was your age too. You're not automatically projecting. dual challenge. I had another client once too, and I like to share this story, especially in these kinds of things and about parenting, because, they hand you a human and they say, raise it and do a good job and make them a productive member of society. No, I'm not telling you how to do it. And there's going to be all these things thrown at you and you just need to figure it out. And this client was 21. This is quite a few years ago. And he had experienced a horrible trauma to a friend. And he wasn't there at the time, but it was something that, where he lived wasn't normal, right? It wasn't something that parents would experience or he would have ever experienced. It happened where he used to live. And he came to me, I guess it was about 2 months into our sessions, and he was starting to work through things and cope better. His parents reached out to me because he was not coping. He was full on PTSD trauma response. And at first, when he first came, he was saying things like, my parents don't know what to say. They don't even know what they're doing with this. Like, this is what they said to me, and this is what they said to me. And so we started working on parents' perspective a little bit too. And after 2 months, he said to me, I think one of the biggest things I've learned in all of this, Christine, is that my parents are human and they're growing and learning too, because how would they know how to deal with something like that? They've never experienced it. And I think that was such a major turning point for this guy to understand that he said, we grew up thinking our parents know everything and they're invincible, but how would they know that? How would they know how to handle that? Valid. Obviously, I can't get into details of what happened because of confidentiality, but yeah, there is no way. I mean, yeah, as a professional, I could help my child through something like that. But as a parent, if I didn't do what I do, I've never experienced anything like that. I've never even been around anything that happened in this situation. So how do they know what to say? They were reading, they were learning, they were trying to help. I gave them tools, right? So I think that from an adult child's perspective, I think that is huge. There is an invisible emotional labor to parenting, and it's real. So let's talk about some of the most common emotional challenges that parents have. Anxiety, the fear that you're messing up your child's future. That is a common anxiety that parents have. What if I mess up my child's future? What if I say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing? Every parent goes through that. I still go through that sometimes, right? And my son's all grown up and I still think, should I have done this? Or I can't believe I did that at that point in his life. I was very young when I had him too. And so, yeah, I made mistakes too. And I've learned over the years I can't go back. That anxiety comes up, absolutely. But I can't go back and say, I should have done this. I think he's turned out pretty okay. Did I make mistakes? Absolutely. Was I a child behavior specialist at the time? Absolutely. I still made mistakes because that was my profession, not my parenting. Often when I share with clients, the messages that we receive between 0 and 8, and I'm sharing it with the clients for them and how the clients that are parents, I'm sharing it with them on how their, core beliefs and attachment styles and everything, we're working on them. And I share this and I see so often, I see this blank dissociation start to happen. And the first couple times I was like, what is happening? Are they reflecting on their childhood? Are they going back? And then now I'm like, oh, here we go. Because the first thing that, they start to dissociate and then they look at me and they say, have I messed up my child? He's 9 or she's 8, or did I screw up? Did I damage them? And I have to help them regroup and say, no, first of all, yeah, you may have done some things that are going to be embedded in their brain? Absolutely. I'm not going to lie to my clients and say, no, you didn't do anything wrong. We all do, because we're learning. But that being said, my whole podcast I did on 0 to 8 and these messages I share, that they can be changed. You can work on those. And if your child's 9, plenty of time to work on them. It's not about looking at, I think that's a parent's worst fear, is damaging their children or doing something that's going to have a lasting impact on their child. Yeah, we do those things. The important part is that we learn from it and then we start to reverse that process. But that anxiety, that fear for your child's future, what can also happen there, though, if that anxiety, so here's the dual challenge again, but if that anxiety is so high that I just talked about co-regulation, you're going to project that anxiety onto your child, but also it can cause, we often talk about bubble wrap generation, right? It can cause you to be a helicopter parent where you're always hovering and you're not allowing your child to make mistakes. You're not allowing your child to experience negative things, negative situations. You are being that buffer all the time. And then that child doesn't learn coping skills, resilience, because of that anxiety that you have. I've said numerous times, one of the hardest things as a parent is pushing that anxiety aside, knowing that your child's going to be hurt. And again, I don't mean catastrophically, but, emotionally, maybe physically. They're climbing on something. You've told them not to do it 4 times. They're going to fall and then they're going to learn, right? Knowing that it's going to happen and letting it happen so they learn from it. Pushing your own anxiety aside is one of the hardest things to do as a parent, because it's our instinct. We're instinctually protective of our children and we want to stop that. But you're actually helping them grow and you're going to grow in the process. The next common parenting struggle emotion is, you ready for it? Guilt. I joke with my clients that I am sure the moms, dads do too, but I often hear the mom guilt. I joke with my clients that I swear that the minute we give birth, they inject guilt into us, right? Because we feel guilty for everything. And we feel guilty when, I didn't do enough. That's a common one. Feeling like we're never doing enough. If you are present for your child, you are supporting your child, they have a roof over their heads, clothes on their backs, food in their bellies, you're doing enough. Being that emotional base for your child is enough. And we think that, especially in today's society, our kids have to be in every activity and they have to have every new device and they have to, that is the society that we live in. And if we can't afford it or we can't, then this guilt comes up. Or I know people who are like, no, my 2-year-old's not having a tablet. I don't want that. And then they feel guilty because people are saying, well, they need to have some downtime. They need to have some, and people I've had clients say this to me and I'm like, well, downtime doesn't have to have a tablet. What do you want for your child? Social media doesn't help with that either. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but I often talk about guilt as the G word, as you know, and I often say that the definition of guilt implies an intent to harm. If you are intentionally trying to harm your child, then yeah, feel guilty. If you are doing the best that you can, monitor that guilt, process that guilt, because again, the dual challenge, if you are feeling guilty for everything, not doing enough, should I have done this differently, so many different things, it would take me a 4-hour podcast to name all of them, but that guilt is going to cause anxiety, and that guilt is going to cause you to give in to everything that your child wants. And I know that some people think that children don't manipulate. I've heard psychologists say that a 4-year-old can't manipulate. Beg to differ on that. A toddler, a 2-year-old can manipulate, a 1-year-old can manipulate. They're not knowing that they're being manipulative, right? But they're going to manipulate to get what they want. And I've seen this. I've seen with kids that I've worked with. I've seen with parents that I've worked with, that kids know the guilt and they will use it to get what they want. And if you allow that guilt to take over, that's going to impact your parenting. It's going to cause you to give in to things that maybe you don't feel that you should. It's also going to cause your child to think that if they do certain things, if they make people feel a certain way, then they get what they want. That is a big struggle that parents have, guilt. I hear that every single session that I have a parent when we're talking about parenting and kids. Burnout. That's the emotional exhaustion that comes with, this constant caregiving. And as I'm sitting here talking about these, I see my gal Lily over here holding her baby bump and probably thinking, holy crap. That's in my mind the whole time I'm talking about this. So sorry, Lily. The rewards far outweigh this, but this is what we're talking about, mental wellness. So the burnout. And I'm also, most people who know me, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I might sugarcoat some things, but I'm going to tell you as it is, right? I'm not going to say that that burnout doesn't happen, that guilt doesn't happen, because then I'm lying, because it does. And, when you have an infant, it's funny. It's funny because we often say, oh, now that we're out of the infant years, it's a little bit easier. We're in the toddler years. I can't wait till they start crawling. And then they're getting into stuff. And then you're like, oh, I can't wait till they start walking. And then you're running after them constantly. Can't wait till they start talking. And then they're talking back or they're asking why all the time. And that can be exhausting. And it can be exhausting with two parents. And if you're a solo parent, it's all on you. And that can be really exhausting. Especially, I was lucky enough to have a really strong support system. My family were amazing. And so that doesn't mean they were with me, when he was up all night and then having to get up to go to work and everything. But I had a great support system. So for those of you who don't, cut yourself some slack. That burnout of constantly caring for the child. And with that comes that constant worry as well, right? And I'd like to tell you the worry stops, but my kid's 33 and the worrying never stops. I mean, when my dad passed, my oldest brother was 58. My dad still worried about us and he still talked about it. He said, you kids all the time and everything. So you're never not a parent. That burnout can continue. So it's important, I'm going to talk about a mini toolkit, but it's important to take those breaks, take that time when you can, if you have support, daycare, that kind of thing, because you need that downtime. You need that break from caregiving sometimes. If mom and dad or mom and mom or dad and dad, a 2-parent household, play off each other, right? Try not to go into well, I did this and this and this. Well, I was doing this and this and this. Just tag team so that each parent has that break. Because if you don't, then guilt's going to come in, anxiety's going to come in, and the next one, shame. Comparing yourself to other parents, viewing yourself as inadequate. Like I said, they hand you a human being and they say, raise it. There's no manual. Do a good job because you don't want to mess it up. We often compare ourselves to other people. One thing I really want to talk about, though, is social media and what it's doing, shame. The amount of people that I see, not only in, my office, but in my personal life, just watching my son and my daughter-in-law be parents and what they deal with and the social media. And I'm going to tell you right now, listen very carefully. What you see on social media isn't always the real deal, right? It's a moment in time when maybe the baby is sitting and quiet, and it's like, oh, this is my day. 5 minutes before that, the baby was screaming and you were pulling your hair out, right? People look at those things. They look at the happy moments. They look at whether it's parenting or couples or families, but we're talking about parenting. So they look at those and then they shame themselves. I can't keep it all together. I had a client say that to me a few weeks ago. Yeah, but I see them and like they're on their 4th child and it's 2 days later and they're fine. And it's okay, but that's a moment in time. Do we know if that person is a perfectionist and wants everyone to think that everything's okay? Did they just melt down in the car before they got there? Were they at home yelling at their husband or their wife because they aren't doing enough or they're overwhelmed? We don't know that. We know that snippet in time where they're like, everything's great. I love this. This is awesome. And then we shame ourselves. So there's that. There's also social media telling you how to parent. When I had my son, and I know when, my mom had us and everything, yeah, we had grandparents, grandmothers, and mothers telling us how we should do things or how they did things. Nowadays, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. No, you should use this type of whatever, and no, you should only give the baby this, and you should do this, and you can't have this. And when I was watching, after my grandson, especially because he was the first, was born, and I don't know how many times, and I know that Jody, my daughter-in-law, I know her mother and I both would look at each other and my sister too, we'd be like, huh? Right? Like all these things that all of a sudden you had to have that, I remember us joking saying, how did our kids survive? And how did we survive? Because it was a lot different when we were kids. But I'm not saying that some of the new things aren't better. Obviously they are because, we evolve. But it's you're not using that type of cloth, or you're not using organic this or that, or you're not breastfeeding. What? That's what's best for the child. All of these things that you hear cause shame, and we compare ourselves to others. Do what you can do. You are doing the best you can. And obviously there are parents out there that don't have their child's best interest. Majority of parents, you're not going to do anything to harm your child. You're going to do what's best on purpose. You're going to do what's best for your child. So don't compare yourself to someone else. Their life is completely different. I just want everyone to really let that sink in. These feelings that I'm talking about don't make you a bad parent. If you feel anxious, if you're burnt out, if you feel the guilt, if you feel shame, I'm explaining why you may be feeling these. I'm telling you that it's okay to feel what you're going to feel, but I'm also telling you that you're doing the best you can. It doesn't mean you're a bad parent if you're feeling this. It means you're human. And you are involved in the most important job of your life. Presence as a parent doesn't mean calm all the time. It means showing up. It means being there, showing up, being present, even when it's hard. My little soapbox. Something I hear all the time though. So what do children need? So let's support our children's mental health. What do children need to thrive emotionally? Safety. They need safety. They need to know that they're loved no matter what. They need to know that they can screw up, and you may be upset with them, you may be disappointed, but you love them. That is the safety that a child needs. Obviously, there's the physical safety and that kind of thing, but what does a child need for their mental health? They need to know that they're loved. They need validation. Their feelings are real and they're allowed. Talk about feelings. Be open with your own feelings. One thing that I have seen in my years, personally and professionally, is parents that don't want to upset their children by showing their emotions. And so they try to hold it in. Well, it's coming out in other ways. But a child, I say this to clients, it's okay to cry in front of your children. Yeah, you might not want to be, rocking back and forth, sobbing and hyperventilating in front of your child. That will scare them. However, children have to see that being sad and crying is normal and it's okay. And so that's validating to a child. Be open about emotions. Talk about emotions. Let them know that their feelings are real and valid and they're allowed to have them. Attunement. So a child needs to know that you notice and you're going to respond to their emotional cues. Learn about your child. See the little things, right? There's little things as you get to know your child that you know when they're sad. It's kind of like as a new parent, you get to learn your baby's cries. You know the hunger cry, you know the frustrated cry, you know the crampy, the poop cry, right? You know those different cries. And so you know how to care for your child. You learn those different cries. You know what they need. And sometimes you don't. And sometimes, you're rocking and you're moving and that kind of thing. But learn about your child's emotional cues too. Notice them so that you can respond to them. And your child needs consistency. They need predictable routines and they need to learn boundaries. I see more and more children with less boundaries now. And I think, again, that goes right back to what we were talking about with the shame and guilt and everything, that boundaries, a lot of times parents are more their friend than their parent. There is a hierarchy and a child needs to learn that. And it's not because, child needs to learn their place. It's a child actually needs to learn that to excel in this world. And so children need these predictable routines too to help them regulate. You don't need to be a therapist to support your child's mental health. You just need to be a safe base for them. Like I said, I was a child behavior specialist. It doesn't mean that I could take all of my skills into as a parent, right? Because I was emotionally invested. So you don't have to be a therapist to respond to your child's emotional needs. You just have to be safe for them. You have to be present for them. And honest with how you're feeling too. So when your child is upset, I want you to try this, okay? This is going to help regulate yourself and your child. When your child is upset, instead of jumping in to fix it, which we often do, say, I can see you're feeling whatever it is. I can see you're feeling upset right now, or I can see you're feeling frustrated right now. And I know that there are a lot of memes out there and people say, oh, that's parenting today. Oh, you have big feelings? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about acknowledging and recognizing your child's and validating your child's feelings. I can see you're feeling frustrated. Can you tell me what happened to make you feel this way? Right? Or that could be something different. If they say, I'm frustrated, can you tell me what happened to make you feel this way? Not just jumping in. Okay, well, let's do this and this. Tell them to do this, right? Just ask them, do you need a hug? Maybe all they need is a hug. I've said before that sometimes as adults, when we're upset or we're venting or whatever, that all we need is for someone to say, yeah, that's hard. That sucks, right? Same with a child. Do you need a hug? Would you like help with how you're feeling? Maybe they want to just process it themselves for a while. And if they say no, then it's, okay, well, I'm here whenever you need help. Or if they're talking to you about it, I feel that way sometimes too. Let them know that you also feel the same way. It normalizes emotion. And another question you can ask your child is, do you want me to just sit with you for a bit? Presence, safe base. Doesn't have to be word base. That moment of emotional naming, labeling helps your child feel seen and heard, and helps them to regulate their emotions, and helps them name their own feelings. If you name it for them, or if you are open with emotions, and then in that moment discuss it with them, or just let them know it's okay to feel it, it helps them regulate, it helps them name it, and they feel seen and heard. And remember that repair is more important than perfection. Sometimes just being there, as a parent, you want to fix it, and you feel that just sitting there isn't fixing it. We don't need to fix it. That is repairing it. And that is better, is more important in that moment than perfection. If you happen to lose your temper, which happens to the best of us, and I'm not talking, situations where it is a toxic parent, or toxic parenting, where losing your temper is a regular thing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about those parents that get burnt out, they're spent, they're exhausted, and they might yell or they lose their temper. I remember one time my son, he was a teenager, but I'm usually pretty even keel, but he just kept pushing me and pushing me and pushing me and pushing me. And I was doing the dishes and I was like, ah, and I threw the bowl into the sink, and it was my favorite bowl, and it broke. And I remember like, geez, now I just broke my favorite bowl, right? I had that moment. There were times in raising my son that I might have said no right away, not even like it was just a go-to, or I may have, lost it a little bit with him. It's about coming back afterwards and saying, I'm sorry if that scared you. I'm sorry if that made you feel uncomfortable. This is why that happened. We talk about, I was feeling angry in that moment, and it's okay to feel angry, but it's what you do when you're angry, and throwing things or yelling or banging things around is not okay when you're angry. Just having those discussions, apologizing, teaches your child that emotions, we all have those uncomfortable emotions. It's what you do afterwards. Obviously, you want to try to control those emotions, and we want to teach our children how to control those emotions, but they're going to happen. We're human, and emotions are instinctual responses to stimuli and situations based on our interpretations. And so in that moment, if you're feeling unsafe, that anger is going to come out to protect you, no matter what it is. And so it's about, obviously, teach your children in those terms, but it's about showing that emotions are okay. Being angry is okay. If you don't handle the anger the way maybe you should, or in a more calmer way, then you apologize for it. What a wonderful teachable moment for a kid. It's, when I say teachable moment, I mean, instead of feeling shame for doing it, for feeling that way, adding to the shame and the guilt, right? There's guilt. Any parent that gets angry always says, oh, I felt so horrible after. I remember when Ryan was little, how sometimes I'd just be like, oh, I can't do this. This is like, I'm exhausted. Ryan, when he was 2, had separation anxiety, and I couldn't even go into the washroom without him screaming. And my friends were talking about it just a couple weeks ago, how my friend Shelly said, I remember, like, you could not leave that little guy's side. Like, if I walked into the other room, he would start to cry and run after me. And that got exhausting. And I can remember just like, oh, just go to sleep. And then he would be asleep, and I'd look at him in his crib. I'm like, oh, why did I get so frustrated? He's so peaceful, until the next morning when he woke up and he was a holy terror. That's normal, right? But that's guilt that you feel. Why did I do that? Why did I get angry? Use it as a teachable. Don't feel shame. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about maintaining your mental health, your own wellness. I have a few strategies that I want to share with parents. And one I call micro boundaries. Obviously, with your child, you can't set like boundaries, like line in the sand kind of boundaries where, nope, I'm doing this and you can't come over to me or anything, right? But when you're in a situation with your child, if your child's tantruming, if it's a teenager and they are, well, being a teenager, talking back, having difficulty managing their emotions, whatever it may be, however you may be feeling, take 5 minutes alone before reacting if you can. If your child is having a temper tantrum, and you're at home, just walk away and sit down. Just take those few minutes before you react. If you can, if you're like, two-parent household, go outside for a second. Just breathe. 3 deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. Let your child know that you need to take a minute to regulate. It's okay, even if your child's tantruming at a young age, it's okay to say, nope, mommy needs a couple of minutes to calm herself down because your screaming is hurting my ears and I need to take a break. Or mommy needs to take a break for a few minutes to calm herself down. And I think that it's a good idea if you take that time as well, right? Teach them that stuff. But for you, letting your child know that you need to regulate, use a language they understand. Obviously, how you tell your 4-year-old would be different than how you would tell your 14-year-old, but still use the language that will teach them that. And what I often suggest to parents is to come up with these strategies beforehand or like throughout their life even. If it's open communication throughout a child's life, it becomes a common language. And so, I have with some clients, parents and children, I will come up with a code word and it's kind of like a safe word. So if either one of them need a break, if things get heated or anything like that, if it's a small child and they're tantruming, maybe it's space. And when the child hears space, they know mom or dad aren't leaving you. They just need to take that step back for a minute and all parties need to decompress a little bit. It helps them understand their role in allowing you to decompress too. Because I think that it's important in families for everyone to learn their roles in helping each other. And this is just another role. If you're feeling frustrated, space, the child knows, okay, my role right now is to go and color or just take a step back or whatever it happens to be. Self-compassion. Be kind to yourself. You are doing the best you can. Replace I'm failing with I'm doing the best that I can. We have clients who have children with some pretty significant needs, outbursts, violent tendencies, getting calls from school to come pick them up. And a common thing that we hear is, I'm failing as a parent. What am I doing wrong? What have I done to my child? You're doing the best you can. That child could have something diagnosable. That child may have experienced trauma that wasn't related to you. There's so many different things that could be happening. Remind yourself that you're doing the best you can with what you know and what you have. I've said it a few times. There is no manual for parenting, and parenting isn't the only job you have. You are juggling a lot in a day. If you sit and reflect on your day, and then you have a child with needs in there as well, cut yourself some slack. So, emotional regulation. Use tools, grounding tools. First thing to do. When you feel yourself starting to go up, a common one that therapists use is called 5-4-3-2-1 grounding. We get information in through our senses, so use those senses to bring you back to time and place. Get out of your head and into the room. So that means 5 things you see. And I don't just say, I see a picture, I see a mirror, I would say, I see a picture with gold and different colors of blue, and it's an abstract painting. I see a mirror that's round with black around it. Like, really look at things and pull things out of it so that you're really focusing on it. So 5 things you see, 4 things you can touch, so tactile, and describe them, right? The blanket's very soft. 3 things you hear, 2 things you smell or like the smell of, and 1 thing you taste or like the taste of. Get out of your head and use your senses to get into the room. Count backwards from 100 by 7s. Every time I say that, clients go, I can really count forwards by 7s. Count backwards from 100 by 7s or 3s, just not 2s or 5s or 1s, something that's easy. You want something more difficult. Spell names backwards. Use categories. So name all of the NHL teams or fruits, vegetables, cities, towns, countries, whatever. Start naming them in your head. Splash cold water on yourself, on your face, or hold on to an ice pack. When we do the cognitive things like counting backwards, spelling backwards, you engage your prefrontal cortex. You engage the processing part of your brain, and so it takes it away from the amygdala. And when you're engaging that part of your brain, you're able to process things better. So you can talk yourself through things better. And often when people do it, they kind of look up. So if they're counting backwards, when I do it, I still picture my grade 2 teacher, Mrs. Fulton, when we were doing counting and stuff, she'd have a big red magnet with the number line on the blackboard, and she would do it. And that's what I picture still is her big red magnet. And I still see her hand on it going, right? And so I'm looking up and I'm doing that and I'm counting because I'm visualizing. If you're doing that, you are completely engaging your prefrontal cortex. And that's what we want you to do. That's going to help regulate your emotions. Breathing as well. So in through your nose, out through your mouth, deep belly breaths or box breathing, those sorts of things. And support systems. So therapy. Again, not just promoting therapy because I am a therapist. I'm saying that you can sometimes get a better understanding of things because we have a helicopter view. We're not emotionally invested. Again, I was a child behavior specialist. Didn't mean that I could use all of the skills as a parent because I was emotionally invested in it. So we can help you with that helicopter view. We can help provide some skill building, coping strategies, that sort of things. And you know what else we do? We listen without judgment. So you can vent. You can be your messiest self as a parent. And I'm not going to say, wow, you're a bad parent, that you would get maybe from other places, especially social media, right? So there's no judgment in a therapy office, or there shouldn't be, or if there is, you need to find a new therapist. But there's no judgment. And so that in itself, just to say, I had a client once say, I know this makes me sound like a really bad parent, but my 5-year-old's an a-hole. And I was like, huh? And she said, not really, but he's talking back and he's not listening to what I'm saying. And we had a little chuckle over it. She obviously didn't call him that to his face, and but she had a safe place that she could just say, this is how I'm feeling. Because let's be honest, people hearing a parent say that, oh, that's horrible, that poor child. She never said it to her child. She said it to me. And she just needed to be honest and get that off her chest. And then we laughed about it, and then we processed it. And then we learned some coping strategies to deal with his behaviors. So there's therapy, there's journaling. Write out your thoughts. Write them out. Say whatever you need to say in those thoughts. The things that you might say to a therapist, say it in your journal. Sometimes just even texting a friend who gets it. I had a client reach out to me, and then in session tell me that she was feeling very isolated as a solo parent and taking her kids to the park. and seeing everybody else, had other people there and everything. And so she texted a close friend of hers who's also a solo parent with 2 children, and she met her at the park, and the 2 moms had time together and the kids all played. And so just doing that removed the isolation. She could see that, okay, well, her friend's in the same boat as her. They just, helped each other out with that. One thing I really stress with parents is to let go of the super parent myth. You don't need to do it all. Your child does not need everything. Your child does not need to be in 4 or 5 different activities. Your child does not need the best of everything, as I've said previously. You cannot possibly be the super parent that everyone, thinks that a parent should be, and maintain your own mental health and support your child's mental health at the same time. You need to do what is sustainable. What's going to, parenting isn't the first 2 years. Parenting is a long time. People say, yeah, I got a parent for 18 years. No, you don't. You're going to be parenting for a very long time. Parenting changes, but it's still parenting. So I just have a few stories from the therapy room that I want to share. And obviously, I'm making them fairly generic. I don't want to breach confidentiality. There will be no identifying information in these. If you are my client, that you may think, oh, I think that's me. It might be. I tried to find stories that aren't just one of my clients, right? That a number of clients come to me with, kind of blended them together. So I don't think one client will say, oh, that's me, but these are common things that we see, and I kind of made them into one person. If that makes sense. Just to do, sharing some stories, but these are also strategies. So I kind of used it in what we worked on and what a parent has used and shared with me to help other parents. So the first one I call the pause. Okay. A dad client that I had learned to pause before reacting to his son's defiance. So instead of yelling, reacting back, right? Because I hear a lot of parents, and I did it too. Okay, the kid's like, why are you yelling at me? Because I just asked you 10 times. And then I lost my patience. And so this dad would use the pause. So instead of yelling, he'd take a breath, slow breath, and he'd say, I need a minute. And he would wait a minute. I'm not saying I need a minute and going off. He would sit there with his child being defiant, and he'd take a breath and he'd say, I need a minute. And he would sit for a minute, and then he would address it. That minute of breathing gets a signal to your prefrontal cortex, not your amygdala, as long as you're not perseverating on what's happening. But if you can just take that minute and breathe and pause, that pause changed everything. Because I said that children look to us for how to react, right? And if they're here and then you meet them there, they go here, or you go here, they go there. You go here, they go there, right? So you yell, they yell louder, then you yell louder. There's no point to that. So that pause changed everything. The next story is called The Mirror. So a mom realized her daughter's anxiety was mirroring her own. She realized that her daughter's anxiety was like, she's me. That's exactly the same as me. And so she started therapy, and we started some strategies, and she learned to regulate herself. She learned to name her emotions with her children. She learned to regulate and teach her children how to regulate with her. She, again, did not feed off her daughter's anxiety. She did not project her anxiety. She became more aware of her own anxiety. She acknowledged it. She noticed it. She acknowledged it. She named it. And then she regulated and her daughter's panic attacks and everything decreased as well. Again, there's the dual challenge, but the mirroring that we talked about. Your kids are looking to you, right? So you regulate, they regulate. It doesn't mean they're always going to regulate, but you don't have to become dysregulated when they're not, when they are. And then the joy ritual. One parent, actually a few of them, started the joy ritual. So every night they'd share one thing that made them smile as a family that day. One thing that made them smile that day. And it became, they made sure, so I had one parent that shared that that's what they did with me. And so then I asked if I could steal it. And then I had other clients do it. So the families that did it, every single night after dinner, they would take the time, 10 minutes, some 15 minutes, and they would go around and say, what's one thing that made you smile today? Sometimes some would add, how did you make someone smile today? Or what was one thing that felt really good? Like they would add them, but what's one thing that made you smile today? Just doing that, it became a bonding moment. It wasn't eat, run here, run there, do this. It was slow, it was controlled, but it was a bonding moment and a mental health anchor for them. And then I was actually seeing one gentleman for individual therapy, an adult, a dad, and it wasn't about parenting. I mean, there was some with that because of some of the stuff that he was experiencing, some of the emotions he was experiencing. So there was some parenting around that, but really cool. What he told me was all the worksheets that I gave him, he would bring them home, and after dinner, his wife, they had 4 children. The 6 of them would sit around the dining room table after dinner and go over the worksheets, and all of them would do them together. Cool, right? I love that idea. And so they were all learning this regulation, the terminology, the strategies, the challenging the thoughts, all of those as a family. So it was a common knowledge. All these stories, these aren't perfect parents. They're intentional ones. They're not perfect, but they are intentionally putting these in to try to regulate their child's mental health and their own at the same time. So just some tools and takeaways. I just want to wrap up with some practical tools. And I've named them already, right? But parent pause. Before reacting, say, I just need to take a moment, or I just need to take a minute. Step away and breathe. Make it a common strategy within the house that the children can use as well. Have some rules around that one because some older children, if they're being disciplined or something, they may say, I just need to take a minute to get out of it, but use it as a common language in the family. Emotion naming. Help your child name their emotions. Ask them what's going on around that time that the emotion comes out. Name the emotion. Talk about the biological feelings with that emotion. Again, if they can connect the physical with the emotional, especially for children, because emotions often come out with like, I have a headache, I have a tummy ache, that kind of thing. So you can help them name it. If they say I have a tummy ache, are you feeling sad? Are you feeling frustrated? Are you feeling lonely? Right? Because you start to see that and then they start to name it and they start to notice it. When you name the emotion, ask them if they want to talk. Joy moment. So not only what I had just said about one thing that made you smile, but schedule one joyful activity just for you every single day. A joyful activity doesn't have to be grandiose, right? A joyful activity for me, sitting on my porch, right? That's a joyful activity. A joyful activity for me, looking at pictures of my grandchildren or videos of them and laughing. Looking at videos of me with my friends and silly things we were doing and laughing. It doesn't have to be big. One joyful, I tell my clients to do this all the time. If they're feeling overwhelmed, I often say one responsibility and one joyful or pleasurable activity every day when they feel like all they have is responsibilities. And obviously, when I say responsibilities, it's not I'll either parent or I'll go to work. I mean, like if you have a task list, it's one responsibility, one joyful activity. And then I'd like you to have a self-compassion mantra. I'm not perfect. I'm present, and that's enough. Tell yourself that every day. You don't have to be a perfect parent, but you do have to be present for your children, and that is going to help them regulate their mental health and then yours in turn. Parenting is not a performance. It's a relationship. And relationships are built on connection, repair, and grace. You're not alone in this. You're not broken. You're not a horrible parent. You're growing and you're learning and you're evolving. Remember, you're raising a human and you are one too. So be kind to yourself. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this episode resonated with you, like us, share, follow, subscribe, and drop us a comment if you have any parenting tips and tricks that you use. If you have any questions that you want to ask us, if there's anything that you want us to dive into a little bit deeper. What I'm trying to do with podcasts and YouTube videos now is kind of do a general one like I did today, and then maybe breaking it down into other, so it might be right now it's your child's supporting your child's mental health and yours. I may do one on supporting your child with special needs mental health and yours so that it resonates with different people. So if there's anything that you would like to hear, let us know. All right. Remember, you're doing the best you can, and take care of you.